Robert Plank Show, episode 181 Seven Principles for Building a Company Culture That Works. Culture is the Base with Gerald Leonard. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Robert Plank Show. Our guest is Gerald J. Leonard, and he's the author of Culture is the Base, Seven Principles for Developing a Culture That Works, and he's currently the president and CEO of Principles of Execution, which is a strategic project portfolio management consulting practice. So Gerald, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Robin. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad that you're here too, and so I kind of have to confess that I'm I've been running an online business for a long while now, and I'm mostly a computer geek. So any
Okay.
any amount of this, the business talk and all that, like I'm always interested in finding out more about that, but I'm kind of not very well educated. Like I don't have a business degree or anything like that. And I think that a lot of people listening, I think that they're gonna enjoy a lot of the like your unique, from what little I've seen, like your unique take on some of the stuff, like having a company culture and all this, leadership and all these principles and things like that. So can you tell us about who you are, what you do, and what makes you special?
Okay. Well, who am I? Well, I started off as a musician, believe it or not, right? Culture's the base. And I went to school for, in my bachelor's and my master's, I did studies in classical and jazz bass at Cincinnati Conservatory of Music and Central State University. Moved to New York and worked in New York as a professional musician. Got to study with one of the teachers that my teacher in Cincinnati, who was a composer and bassist, studied with David Walter at Juilliard for a year in professional studies. So I got to do a lot with music, and I grew up playing and loved to play, and I still play quite a bit. But I went into the ministry after that, and I kept playing, and I did things within the ministry. I did things within music, and fell in love and found my wife, and next thing I know, I have two kids, and I still want to play music. So I decided to come out of the music, come out of the ministry, and get back into music. But I don't want to be on the road, and I want to take care of my kids. So it really drove me to get into IT, so I could, make a living and still play, but be there for my kids and my wife. And I realized that I didn't want to go back and get a PhD or another master's. So I decided to just go after certifications. And here I am, 20 years later, running my own consulting practice, a ton of certifications behind my belt, playing music here and there, and doing IT, project management, and a whole bunch of other things.
Awesome. So it sounds like you're a guy who's, I mean, first of all, like really smart, lots of interesting hobbies and lots of skills that kind of come to play in different areas.
Yeah, and what's interesting is because I didn't grow up business wise with a business degree, I think different than just a business person or even an engineer or even a project manager who grew up in an engineering, going to school for engineering. I think a little bit outside the box because of that. And so the whole concept of the book, Culture is the Base, with the work that I've done, I've noticed that certain companies are able to really execute, and there's a feel of people are united, working together, and excited. And then there's also companies where it's not that way. And just like there are bands where you go in and listen to the band, and you're like, wow, this is a really good band. The bass player, the horn player, and you feel that vibe. It's an emotional journey that you go on with them. And I started connecting the two together and realized that business folks could learn a lot from musicians and how they get together. And when you are playing music, it doesn't matter what background you come from. If you're good and the other person you're playing with is good, you get together and have a great time. And you've created an emotional bond that really could last a lifetime. And great companies tend to do the same thing. So it helps you kind of think outside the box when you don't grow up in that one discipline area, but you've kind of had a chance to experience different areas of your life.
Right, and I'm starting to sort of get a feel for what you're saying. So, I mean, it sounds like, so like in the same way that you might see a band where everyone's talented, they kind of gel pretty well with each other, they kind of work together, and then so you can apply this for businesses and things like that, where if you have good people, then you can get help them to all work together smoothly. Is that right?
Exactly. I mean, imagine one of the things I have in my book that I say is imagine going to a concert, right? You go to this concert, you got all these world class musicians, and on their music stand is different music. And they start playing, and each one's playing perfectly their part of the music, but it's a different song. It's like, is that a concert you'd want to go to, right? You're like, no way, because there's no harmony, there's nobody playing together. They're individually, they're really good, but together it sounds like a mess.
Right.
Now think about a company where you walk in and the IT guy is really good at technology, but he's not listening to anybody else, or the finance guy is really good at finances, but he's not connected and listening to anyone else. The operations guy is really good at what he does, but he's not listening to anyone else. When you put that together, what are you going to have? A mess. Instead of them being able to listen to each other, work together, and cohesively create this orchestrated harmony, and that's the goal, right? And so if you have a band or an orchestra and they're all in the same sheet of music, playing the same song, whether it's Beethoven, Bach, whether it's the Beatles, whether it's James Brown, whatever that is, if they're all together, there's passion, and they're playing in harmony, it's going to elevate you and take you to a different place. And companies can do the same if they're working together.
Right. I mean, it sounds like the kind of situation where like the sum is greater than the parts. You have all these people who they're all good in their own individual areas, and then you get those relationships working together in the right way, and then it's not like if you have five people in this team, like the IT person and the marketing person or whatever, you have these five people, and them combined together is not five times as good, but it's 50 times as good.
Exactly. Exactly.
So could you kind of walk us through like so as far as solving this problem of getting talented people working together and being complementary and not conflicting, like what's the normal like stereotypical, maybe even a little bit of like outdated way that people try that this culture is the base way of thinking is better.
Okay, so let's say the old way is, you get together and maybe once a month or once a week you have a company meeting, and you have a vision statement, and you're planning on making some changes to the business, and you may even bring in an outside consultant, and you say, well, here's the systems, here's our processes, and here's some tools that we're going to work on, and we're going to really go after this, and you're going to say, here's our goal, and you'll have a kickoff meeting, and everyone starts working towards it. And what you find is that you haven't made sure that one, everyone understands what exactly is the problem we're trying to solve. You haven't gotten everyone on the board where they actually understand the core values that the company is espousing and that everyone's on the same page there. You haven't spent time getting everyone to have buy-in. Because if you can have one or two people to buy in, but not everyone buys in, it's still not going to work. And I always say buy-in is a team sport. And so what I do in the book is talk about these 7 principles that I've not only experienced and lived for the last 20 years, but going back and doing a lot of research. So even though the book is like 136 pages, there's a lot of research that I did from Harvard Business School statistics and case studies, looking at some statistics from MIT, looking at what the McKinsey Group has done from an consulting management stand, and they all kind of gravitate towards these 7 ideas.
Cool. So the 7 principles. This isn't just something that is made up. It's actually backed up and based on your research and all that good stuff.
Exactly. It's based on research and it's based on empirical data that comes from major companies like Amazon, Zappos, Nordstrom. If you look at those companies, you're going to find these 7 principles at play.
So now you have my curiosity going. So what are these 7 principles?
Okay, perfect. So the first one is vision. Sorry, vision is what's the intent and where are we trying to go as a company? What's our overall goal and what's our dream? Where are we trying to go? The next thing you have to have is you have to have everyone who is focused on the same values. And I look at values as actionable items, right? They're governing principles that governs behavior. Just like you think about integrity, you think about honesty, those are values, but you can actually see those values lived out in people's lives. So if you have a great vision and everyone believes in the same values, then you want everyone to buy in. And the way you get people to buy in is you tell great stories. You think about all the great literature and from different philosophers and philosophies and the Bible and other things like that. They all have great stories built into them because stories we can relate. And what stories do is they capture our heads, they capture our hearts, and they capture our hands. And they can. And if we hear the right story about why we're doing this and why we're going and what's the vision and what's the values, it's going to create that buy-in. And like many of the great companies, they do not hire people that are not aligned to their values or quote unquote culture, right? So once you have those four main soft principles, then you want to bake those into your best practices. So, and best practices to me are processes that are streamlined and simple, that are repeatable, and that are not difficult for people to catch on to, but produce a predictable result. So if your vision, values, buy-in, and stories are baked into your best practices, and you're creating an environment, whether it's the physical environment of your office or the virtual environment of your software and processes or your HR processes or how people are encouraged to treat each other, you create an environment that is open and people feel like they can share their thoughts or whatever kind of environment you want to create that's going to be tied to your culture. You create that environment, and once you have those 6 elements going, and you add a cadence of accountability where it's not just a top-down accountability, but it's a peer accountability, like peer groups and team members, then you're going to create an organization that can execute.
Awesome, and I mean, this has a lot of ideas going in my head, and I'm starting to get a better feel of what the whole like company culture thing means, because like that's something that I think like I've heard and maybe a lot of other people hear, and you hear about like, well, Zappos prides themselves on like really good like customer service and stuff like that, and then like Amazon has that thing, some kind of system where like any employee can anonymously submit like thoughts on about how they feel and stuff like that. And so so can you make sure that that I'm understanding this right? So the 7 principles here are vision, values, buy-in, stories, best practices, culture, and accountability. Did I get those right?
Well, the last 2 are environment and execution.
Okay. All right.
The last 2 are environment and execution.
And okay, so if someone has these are so okay, so someone's if someone's system is currently failing or could be better, so they can run through these 7 things and just kind of see if it passes the test, or how does somebody take like a company culture that's not working and then make sure that it applies to this.
Well, first off, like with anything, you can do an assessment on it. So you can, I've put together an online assessment that, in fact, my online assessment talks about the 11 things that are common mistakes. So you can do an assessment on, okay, are we making the top 11 mistakes that are out there for culture that can take a culture down the wrong road? But you can basically create an assessment or have an assessment of where are we from a cultural standpoint. Do people in the company understand our values? Do people understand the vision? Have people in my company bought into where the company's going? What stories are being told? Are they being repeated? How do people feel about the stories that are being told? What library of best practices do we have? And with our best practices, are they documented? Do we have systems that enforce those best practices? What's our environment like? Is it water cooler talk? Is it closed door meetings? Is it open atriums? Is it? Think about the environment and compare Southwest Airlines to another airline. I don't want to throw any other airline out there, but I just compare them to Southwest. But think about Southwest. You take a flight and it's fun the whole trip. It's fun the whole time, and you know what you're going to get and you know what you're not going to get. And so if you know that you want to have a great time, you want to get to your destination, and being in first class doesn't matter, then Southwest is going to be your flight. So that's where culture comes in, where you know if this is the experience I want, then I know I can go to this company because I'm going to get that same experience all the time.
So with all these things that we're listing, I mean, what's the big benefit uh, to having these seven principles in place? I mean, I'm hearing different things like, maybe the employees will stay longer and have more fun, or maybe the customers will know like exactly what they're getting. I mean, what's the real big, like the top one or two like big advantages to having these seven principles?
Well, I think it's employee satisfaction and retention, because if you think about what does it cost for companies to bring on people and then constantly have a churn of employees, right, and not have employees that are loyal. It's usually quite a bit. And I think it's whatever their yearly salary is. It's almost close to that to replace them once they leave. So imagine you hire someone for $50,000, they stay for 3 or 4 months, and then you have to let them go and now go back and hire someone else. All the time you've wasted. So you're just kind of pouring money down the drain as a business when you don't have a clearly defined culture and have thought these things through, and you're churning through people in your company. The second thing is that from an execution standpoint, companies that have great culture, they're adding 20 to 30% to their bottom line from a profit standpoint. Because imagine if there's incredible trust built within the company, then when you're there to execute one of your key initiatives, you don't have to worry about playing politics and all of the other character delaying things that happen for companies that are trying to generate these great initiatives. They're able to make a great return on their investments because of that.
And that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like if some kind of organization is always having to deal with that turnover and putting out different fires and trying to hire new people, it sounds like a lot of spinning of the wheels. And I mean, I think about things like like Google just did something a while ago where I guess they give like a 1 year maternity leave to their female employees, or some companies are giving like paternity leave, or like crazy things like that. And then it makes me think back to before I was a full-time business owner. I would do computer stuff, and there was this one specific project that like a person was assigned to it, and that person quit like a month or two later. Then they assigned it to someone else. That person quit a month or two later, and then they assigned it to me, and then I quit a month or two later. And it kind of makes me flash back to times where there wasn't anything particularly like wrong or hostile or anything about that environment, but it was just like things were conflicting, and people were just tending to leave if they were put on a certain type of a job. So this is starting to make a lot of sense to me.
Right. In fact, I'm going to quote something from the book, and the source is from the Corporate Leadership Council, and it says, engaged organizations grew profits as much as 3 times faster than competitors. They report that highly engaged organizations have the potential to reduce staff turnover by 87% and improve performance by 20%. And the source is the Corporate Leadership Council.
Crazy. And what's cool about the way that you've been explaining this to us so far is that, I mean, it's not like magic. It's someone can clearly see if they're in compliance, so to speak, with these principles or not. And so could you kind of run us through like some sort of a before and after, or a case study where you were helping out some sort of business and they didn't quite have everything figured out, and then you set them on their way?
Right. So right now I'm working with a large state organization, and I won't give the details away of exactly who it is because of confidentiality. But I'm working with as a consultant with a large state organization, government organization. And when I went in, the team that I was working with, there's a lot of second guessing each other. There's a lot of finger pointing. And as we began to, and my role there wasn't just to roll out culture. It was to help with an integration of a very complex system. But I knew that, again, system processes and tools are not enough. And so we were given a deadline to, in fact, I talk about it in my book, but we were given a deadline to prove that the system could work in 15 days. And we were able to do a presentation and a demo of that on day 14. But the process that we used, where we talked about what our vision is, we talked about, here's the values of our team, and then got everyone to buy in by having daily stand-ups and weekly meetings with our sponsors for that period of time, and really working together and creating this environment that allowed us to support each other. It created a culture within our team that's now permeated through other parts of the company or organization, as well as I've gone out and trained a lot of their project managers across the state, where now they're able to execute projects much faster. Things are getting done. And even when we've had bumps on other things that we've had to deal with, we always go back to that first experience, that story. And that's the power of stories, where it's like, hey, we've been through this before. Remember when? And we tell that story. And everybody goes, yeah, you know what? We can get through this. Let's go for it. And we do.
Amazing. And you know what? As you're talking about that kind of stuff, and you're talking about the different principles that are important or that apply it in different areas. I mean, it's making me sort of flashback a little bit to I wasn't much of a musician. I played in school band for about 5 years, and there were a few years where we had a really good instructor, and there were times when he'd kind of have to push us or kind of have to be like freaking out or whatever.
Right.
And I played saxophone and stuff,
Okay.
but like a lot of the times it would just kind of work, and I wasn't really sure like exactly what it was, but then in the later years, then he left and they brought in a new instructor, and he just wasn't very good, and for whatever reason, all the talent in the room in the band just it felt like we weren't living up to our full potential, and it was like a lot of the same people and
Right.
playing the same instruments and stuff like that, but just the leadership at the top just wasn't wasn't there, or wasn't what it had to be, and I never really understood why that was, because it's not like the guy who was good was like a huge micromanager, only the small times when he had to be, but just I'm when I'm hearing about the buying in and the stories and the vision and the values and all these different pieces of it, I mean, it's making a lot of sense, and I can see why you were able to take this musician type of stuff and kind of put it into the corporate culture and all that, because it seems like it's very similar. Like there's all the pieces, and they all have to work together, and there's certain times when people kind of have to work by themselves, but then a lot of times if you do all this great work by yourself but you can't work with the other pieces, then what's the point? So this is all kind of starting to soak in for me here.
Exactly. And I bet you the difference between those two band conductors was that one gave you guys the ability to be creative and help create what you were doing.
Okay.
Think about the past experiences, because a part of buy-in, people buy into what they help create.
Right, because if it's just handed to you, or if you're just like blindly following these series of steps, then it's like, well, I'm just kind of along for the ride. I'm kind of being
I'm,
dragged along. I'm not actually part
exactly.
of it.
I'm a clog on the wheel doing my job. I'm a hamster running on the treadmill. I'm not a creative and valued human being that has thoughts and feelings and can bring value to what I'm doing. So when you are part of a team where you're honored in that way and given the ability to help create, right? One, you're then going to buy into the vision and the mission more, but you're also going to be bringing your passion to the job. And a lot of times in corporate America, we don't use words like passion as much. I mean, they use them in entrepreneurial environments where the CEO is very passionate. But in day-to-day work, it's like, not another day, right? It's like
Right.
the commercial. But it can be passionate if you are a part of a team where you we've created buy-in, and you get to play a part in that, and you start seeing exciting things happen. You wake up in the morning going, I can't wait to go be with my team because to see what we're going to create today because we've created this culture. And that's what you experience when you go to Nordstrom and you go to Southwest and you go to Zappos, is you're talking to people who are able to help create the culture that they're living in.
Interesting. So I mean, so if someone is looking at their team or something like that, and I mean I guess so. What are like the red flags, or if someone was looking at their team and they said this isn't working, something's really bad. I mean, what in particular should they be looking for to let them know that they really badly need these principles and need this training? I mean, is it like the the employee turnover thing that we mentioned, or is it the feeling that people aren't allowed to be creative? Or I mean, what's just like the big mistake that everyone should be really on the lookout for? And if they're making this mistake, they should go to you and get your book.
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is how you create buy-in, because whatever your vision is and whatever your values are, if you can't create buy-in, then you can't motivate your team. It's kind of like, Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, talks about getting the right people on the bus and getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. But if you get the right people on the bus, but they don't buy into being on the bus, even though you got them there, you're still not going to create anything. And so a part of one of the things I have in the beginning of the book, right at the end, I think, of the first chapter, I talk about the 11 common mistakes people make. And one of them is taking a wrong approach to creating buy-in or engaging the workforce. So if you're not engaging, it's kind of like that band instructor. You had one that was very engaging and one that was just kind of let's just play the music. That permeates throughout the band, and pretty soon everybody comes in and you just want to play the music, but you're not there to create passion and to create something. Poor planning or poor implementation of your plan. Not getting your staff's input, not getting their input, helping them to create it. Too many directions. Trying to generate too many directions, or trying to take the team down too many directions. Not aligning your decisions and the things that you're doing with what you said are the goals or the values. Not having clear roles. So there's a number of things, and that's just a part of my top 11 mistakes that these companies make or individuals make. But as you can see from that, it's turnover and poor profits are a sign or a symptom of a poor culture.
And I like the way that you just put that, is that people might look at something that's going wrong, but it might just be a symptom, and they might think of a way to put a band-aid on some kind of problem. But if they don't have that buy-in in place, then they're dead in the water, and they can be putting in all this work to try to fix the symptom, but not actually going to the root cause, which is that they don't have good leadership and they need these principles, it sounds like.
Exactly. And if you don't have buy-in, then you have to ask yourself, do I not have good people? If I have good people, but I don't have buy-in, then do they not believe in my values, or do they not believe in the mission? Or am I not telling the story in a way that's compelling? Because I might have a great vision, I may have great values, and I have great people, but if I don't know how to position that, I mean, think of what John Kennedy said, we're going to go to the moon. It's like, what? We're going to go to the moon? But he got the whole country behind him because he had a mission and he got buy-in, and the birth of that was NASA.
Right. And yeah, and this is pretty cool. And I really like the way that you've kind of broken down this problem into more manageable pieces, so that if there's this huge if people aren't getting the results they want, or the leadership's failing or whatever, they can just break it down and figure out, okay, well, where's the hurt at? So could you tell us more about the book and about your websites? And what I'm especially curious about is, what kind of person is this for specifically?
Well, I mean, I initially wrote the book for people who are in project and program and portfolio management and who help manage projects. But honestly, once I had a lot of my readers are friends that start reading it, because I actually socialized the book a lot as I was writing it. I heard back from a lot of people who weren't one of those roles that said, I can relate to this. And in fact, this can be used in any situation. And I didn't want to write it for the masses, but I think it does have a mass appeal from the standpoint that if you've listened to music, if you have songs that you like, the analogies are written in such a way that you don't have to be a musician to understand them. You can just be a music lover, but you have gone to a concert and you can see how that can be applied to your business. And then I did a lot of research when I wrote the book. In fact, I looked on a lot of the book websites and I looked at all the number one and two comments to see what was missing, what was lacking. And one, they didn't want a book on heavy theory. They wanted a book that had unique stories, that was practical, and at the end would give you questions to consider and some specific takeaways and things that you could do right now after you read that chapter to go improve your business. And so when I wrote the book, I made sure that I put those things in there.
Awesome. I mean, it sounds like a good way to differentiate yourself. If everyone else talks about pie in the sky theory, then you're the guy who tells them how to actually get it done.
Exactly, exactly. And they can find out about it on my website, which is at principlesofexecution.com, or they can, the book is on Amazon in the Kindle version and on paperback.
Cool. And that Amazon book is Culture is the Base, spelled BASS. Is that right?
Yes, yes. That's the way that's the, when you're playing a bass, it's not bass like the fish. I know some people look and go, is culture the bass? No, that's not it. It's the bass. That's why there's an image of a bass there. But it really helps you, again, with that music analogy, because, again, if you have a great song, it always has a great bass line.
Right. Well, cool. Well, okay, so Culture is the Base at Amazon, and then principlesofexecution.com. And so I want to thank you so much, Gerald, for hopping on the show today, because this is one of those, like, the way that I keep thinking about this as you're describing is it seems like a huge problem to solve, but once it's broken down and once the pieces start to make sense and how the pieces work together, then it slowly becomes clearer. At least it sounds like to me of where is the failure point and what needs to be improved and fixed. So I really appreciate you being on and sharing what you had to share with us today.
No problem. Glad you have me, and thanks so much.
This is Robert Plank. Thanks for listening, and I wish a wonderful day upon you. Go to robertplankshow.com to like us on Facebook.